As a longtime Yu-Gi-Oh fan, you'd assume I would have some kind of soft spot for the original show, and you'd be right if you asked me in 2016, the year I watched all of Season 1. As I see it now, after owning all 4 seasons on DVD and just generally burdened by the passage of time and gaining, I can confidently say that this show is just alright. Aside from Season 5, but that's a story for another day. When I watch the first season of Yu-Gi-Oh, it feels very rushed in the sense that it's trying to cram in as much as it possibly can. Take the first 3 episodes, for example. It introduces 2 characters that won't get their time in the spotlight for a while, introduces a rival character that pretty much fucks off after 1 episode, only to come back after future developments happen, hospitalize 1 character who then recovers at the end of the episode, only to then be kidnapped at the end of the following episode, introduces a motive for Jinochi to take the Duelist Kingdom with him, tells us the strong friendship between him and Yugi rather than show us, and also introduces another character who does fuck all for 11 episodes before he's introduced properly. This all happens in that order. In 3 fucking episodes. To be a little bit fair, the first episode really doesn't do anything wrong with the way it introduces Jinochi, Honda, and Yugi. Their characterizations are pretty consistent with how they act in chapters 60 and onward. The real problem lies in what versions of these characters this episode uses, along with the creative liberties it takes to change others. The fact that it tries to start at the point where Kazuki Takahashi made the card game the central focus while adding a condensed version of a major story arc doesn't help much either. Because of how much this episode skips over, it's hard to really say that episode 1 gets the main conflict of Duelist Kingdom running, which essentially revolves around this one duel between Yugi and Kaiba, which was a massive payoff for a 17 chapter long story arc. Yugi is by far the most out of character in this episode. Sure, he acts exactly how he's supposed to in the Duelist Kingdom section of the story, but he acts nothing like how he was depicted during previous chapters. By condensing and/or skipping through the first 59 chapters of the source material, episode 1 completely erases Yugi's character development. At the start of the story, he's portrayed as a shy freshman who gets pushed around a lot, which would change at the latter half of the chapter where Dark Yugi comes in and puts his wrongdoers out of commission. But Yugi's other self doesn't always need to be around for him to be a great character. One of the key moments in chapter 1 that makes Yugi a character worth following is when he stands up to the school's hall monitor for beating up his bullies, despite having every right to do the exact opposite. After being pushed around by Jinochi, Honda, and now Ushio, Yugi breaks out of his evasive shell to stop him from hurting the two even more. After that, we see him slowly form the friend group we all know, as well as slowly transitioning out of his timid personality, to the point where he willingly joins Jinochi in the search for his stolen sneakers. For context, they were stolen by a bunch of thugs Jinochi goes on to beat up. Another example of this can be found in Seto Kaiba's introductory chapter. After he steals Sugoroku's blue eyes, Yugi confronts Kaiba all by himself, hoping that he'll give the card back. Even though his efforts to solve the problem peacefully fails, this is a major moment for this character who would not have done something like this a few chapters ago. But Yugi's journey doesn't end there. Both the Shadi arc and Def T arc introduces the concept of Yugi becoming more aware of his other self, letting him come a little more into his own, while giving him even more courage to stand up for himself, not only to others, but to his other self when necessary. Takahashi's talent as an artist does a lot to sell Yugi's development as well. In a lot of panels, he draws Yugi in a very particular way, in which his eyebrows hang over his eyes, like in this page of him reacting to Kaiba putting his grandpa through a penalty game simulation. Yugi here looks like he's holding back his anger from fully showing itself. And this isn't the fault of the artist, because Takahashi has given many examples of other characters making angry expressions, so Yugi's eyebrows never overlapping his eyes is an intentional artistic decision, made even more evident when Yugi begins to use his eyebrows to express even more during Def T and after. If you've already seen the first episode, you know this aspect of Yu-Gi-Oh's visual storytelling was lost in translation. This was probably because a subtle artistic choice like this in a 20-minute episode wouldn't have had an impact on the same level as the source material, but I'm not exactly sure. Yugi still discovers his other self in the show, but it's a lot different, particularly with the placement of his first meeting with Shadi, the catalyst of the two becoming more aware of each other. Yugi and Shadi meet almost immediately after his duel with Pegasus, which makes it feel like they scrambled to include him at the last minute, which I don't blame them, because he does become a reoccurring character throughout the story from time to time. Dark Yugi's cut was not as extensive as Yugi's, but it's important enough to touch upon. Leading up to his first duel with Pegasus, Dark Yugi has had a very consistent track record of wins, making it even more surprising that he loses loses both the game and Grandpa's soul. This is important because Dark Yugi's own pride as a duelist and individual is tested during his time in Duelist Kingdom. He continues to smash every obstacle in his way, that is until his rematch with Kaiba, who turns the tides by betting his own life on their game at the last minute, which leads to Dark Yugi accepting that his other self made up for his own flaws later on during his duel with Mai. Fortunately, this is one of the few things that the show had no problem adapting without any drastic changes. Technically. Because of the number of duels in the show, Dark Yugi's win streak is just high enough to the point where his overinflated pride as a duelist is still believable, but I think that it's much more effective in the manga thanks to all the other 27 non-Duel Monsters games he plays and wins. If we add both matches with Kaiba and his 5 Duelist Kingdom wins with the other 27, that leaves Yugi with a total of 34 wins. That number is more than enough to make Dark Yugi overconfident in his own skills. Applying the past 59 chapters doesn't just serve the pride aspect of Dark Yugi's arc, but also reinforces how far he's willing to go for a win once you remember that he has killed his opponents a few times before, or was fine with leaving them to die. Back then, Yugi wasn't aware of the other self in his heart, meaning he couldn't have stepped in to stop him in those past situations, which makes his decision to stop Celtic Guardian's attack all the more impactful now that he's aware of his other self. Look, I know I'm practically finished talking about Yugi, but I would like to quickly rewind the video for a second. Bear with me here, okay? This snippet in Yugi's story isn't just a major character moment that changes him, that also applies to Katsuya Jinochi, who was introduced as one of Yugi's classmates who bullied him. Because of the way we first meet him, Jinochi comes off as a pretty selfish character that's very easy to hate early on, especially after he chucks Yugi's puzzle piece out the window. But after seeing Yugi defend him despite picking on him for seemingly shallow reasons, his actions bewildered Jinochi, and it makes him reconsider his viewpoint on both Yugi and himself. He ends up returning the stolen puzzle piece to Yugi anonymously through Sugoroku. Seeing Yugi shield him from Ushio while calling him his friend, it made him want to do something selfless for once, even if he's too embarrassed to admit it. After the two become genuine friends, we get to see a much more goofier side to him, whether he's on the hunt for a supposed celebrity in school, or complaining about the censorship in his adult VHS. Jinochi still gets into physical fights with others, but most fights we see him get into are for the benefit of others rather than himself. Like when he gets into a fight with this Bruce Lee fanboy for stealing Yugi's puzzle after he kept beating him at an arcade game. The only time he gets into a fight to benefit himself is when the sneakers he got for free are stolen by some thugs the seller hired. Despite still being a delinquent, Jinochi becomes just as likable as Yugi. The two are complete polar opposites to one another, but they manage to become long-lasting friends in spite of the opposing forces that try to sever this connection. So it's extremely disappointing that such an important moment like this can get sidelined into a minute-long flashback while Jinochi and Yugi provide background VO. Another unspoken aspect of Jinochi's character development can be seen through the gradual design shift he undergoes throughout the first 50 chapters. This change isn't exclusive to him, as we see almost every reoccurring character get a design shift every now and then, but Jinochi's shift feels all the more special and unique because of how drastic his design change is. When both Toei and Gallop had the chance to animate this section of the story, they forgo Jinochi's older design in favor of his newer one, which I can understand, as you probably don't want to clutter your workload by giving one character 2 designs to worry about. Not that they weren't already doing that with Yugi and Dark Yugi, but whatever. I can see why they did not preserve Jinochi's old design. It doesn't really hurt his arc, but his journey from where he started to where he is now does feel a lot less impactful when you take out the transition from Design A to Design B. Yugi's other former bully was just as unlucky as the first when talking about sidelined character development. Unlike Jinochi, who immediately treated Yugi better after the Ushio incident, Honda still treated him terribly, moving on from bullying him to making him do trivial tasks for him. The decision to not have Honda instantly become friends with Yugi was one I really appreciate, especially since it makes Honda his own individual, going forward from him just being the second bully who gets into just as many fights as Jinochi. Honda only becomes Yugi's friend after he tries taking the fall for the love letter placed under his crush's desk. Honda, like Jinochi, is surprised by Yugi's actions despite the way he has treated him, and becomes good friends with Yugi from then on. To be fair to Gallop, it wasn't their fault that Honda had almost nothing to do during Duelist Kingdom, cause he doesn't really do much either in the manga, both before and after this arc. But because of this long period of silence, moments like Honda asking Yugi to save the Kaiba brothers feels much more impactful to me. This was something I was not really expecting Honda to do.
I mean, I know he saves Mokuba in the show, but in said show, Honda saves Mokuba's empty body so that Pegasus doesn't have any more leverage to use in his duel with Yugi.
It's honestly not that bad of a change, but I prefer the version where Honda is repaying Mokuba for saving him when he could have died in that cube room. Speaking of, for me, what makes the Kaiba brothers interesting to follow isn't just the fact that one of them is the main rival of the story, but because they are both some of the only wrongdoers who recover from Dark Yugi's penalty games, giving them a motivation for revenge and to build Def T, but because they are both looking for the approval of others, at least at first. Kaiba sought after the status of best gamer/duelist, showing how fixated he is on not just revenge, but doing it alone without his little brother, which is why he's okay with putting him through a penalty game without a second thought. Kaiba's entire mindset of winning it solo shatters once Dark Yugi draws Exodia, which acts as a metaphor for unity or friendship. And the lasting impact of this duel that's found in Duelist Kingdom starts with Kaiba's second penalty game that shatters his heart and sends him into a 6-month coma, tanking the company's stocks and reputation. I never really understood why they wanted Pegasus to beat Yugi in a duel in order for them to give him the company, but it makes a little more sense in the manga. Since Yugi and Kaiba's duel was held publicly rather than in private, it makes more sense how a loss like that could have damaged their stocks, along with the coma-induced Seto. And having the game's creator best the individual who tanked the company image feels like a much better reason for the Big Five to let Pegasus buy the Kaiba Corporation. Oh yeah, Pegasus still has to give them money. I don't know why they cut that out of the 4Kids dub. Like, they already established that money exists. Hell, it's the reason Jinochi even goes to Duelist Kingdom. The sub of the show has this explanation too, but word of this duel spreads thanks to Pegasus, probably. But I find that to be very unrealistic and unlikely. This duel was never televised in the show, and you're telling me that a company's image went down after some rich dude started yapping about the president losing a game to some kid, with no evidence to back up this claim? Yeah, I don't believe that. This also makes the duel between Yugi and fake Kaiba much weaker, because this duel hinges on the possibility of Kaiba being dead.
We know as an audience that they wouldn't just kill off the rival character, and then it gets even more weaker when one episode later, they reveal that Kaiba is alive after he jumped out his window.
But in the manga, it's an actual question that leaves the reader wondering if Kaiba has actually died sitting on his wheelchair. But it's soon revealed that Kaiba is alive after his Blue Eyes refuses to attack, calling back to his first duel with Yugi when Sugoroku's Blue Eyes refused as well. And I gotta say, this page of Kaiba rising from his wheelchair might just be one of the best pages in the series. I mean, just look at it! One other reason I prefer the manga over the show is who Yugi faces in this duel. His opponent is just this really creepy puppeteer guy with an even creepier Kaiba puppet pretending to house the angry soul of his fallen rival. Gallop decided to change this with Seto Kaiba. He doesn't even look creepy half the time, aside from maybe this shot and this part where the real player breaks out of their disguise. Now, this will come as a shock to all of you who grew up with the 4Kids dub. Trust me, it shocked me as well. This isn't Kaiba's evil half that Yugi destroyed after their duel. This is just some dude that is really good at impressions. He even does one of Pegasus on the spot. Sorry, but I just can't get over the fact that this isn't Kaiba's evil side. 4Kids just pulled that one out of their ass. What the fuck? Kaiba departs for Duelist Kingdom shortly after waking up to save his company. At least that's what I think most readers would assume if they were only ever exposed to this version of the story. Despite him only asking about Mokuba, a part of me thinks that Takahashi wanted the reader to be suspicious about this, especially since his revival came right after learning that Mokuba has an important safe key in his stomach. It'd be hard to believe such a thing coming from the guy who had no problem leaving his brother out for the digital penalty. Time and time again, Kaiba is more so worried about the safety of his little brother than his company. He keeps this all to himself, rather than boast about it towards Yugi and the gang, opting to lower Jinochi's confidence while testing his dual disc prototype. Where in the show, he just tells Yugi and Co that he's here to save Mokuba and Kaiba Corp for no real reason. He doesn't even know them personally, other than the fact that they're classmates, which is why I think he decides to keep to himself and let them assume why he's on Pegasus Island. Jinochi, Honda, and Anzu all remember what happened at Def T, how Kaiba left Yugi's grandpa overwhelmed by his battle box simulation, how he turned on his brother the moment he lost. Even Yugi doesn't believe that Kaiba has changed 6 months after their last encounter. Kaiba's past actions also play a part in why he doesn't tell them he's here for his brother. At least I believe so. For them, it'd be hard to imagine him prioritizing his brother over his company since he never gave Mokuba a second thought back then. It takes us a while and even more time for the main group to believe it, but Kaiba is here to save his only remaining family from Pegasus. Like Yugi and Jinochi, amongst a sea of competitors only interested in themselves, the prize money, and their status in the Duel Monsters competitive scene, Mokuba aspired to gain the approval of his older brother, which he never gets during Def T, especially after losing to Yugi twice in a row, coming up to 3. But after his third loss, Mokuba begins to question if this even is his brother, especially since he was bailed out by the very person Seto's trying to defeat. But he continues to hold on to hope for his brother after Yugi tells him he'll wake up once he's finished reconstructing his now shattered heart. Another weird change comes in the form of the Kaiba Corp document safe. For some reason, the show makes this key a Duel Monsters card, and then the card is just never seen again. I don't even think it comes up in conversation again past this flashback. Actually, no, it does come up again, but Dark Bakura is after it for some reason. I don't know. In the manga, it's just a regular ass key that Mokuba ends up swallowing to keep the safe safe, which is why he's on the Duelist Kingdom Island in the first place. When we see Mokuba again, 34 chapters after his last appearance, he's trying to sabotage Pegasus' goal of buying out Kaiba Corporation via the Big Five stipulation of defeating Yugi at Duel Monsters. He carries a grudge against Yugi for putting his brother in the coma that ended up leaving their company in a vulnerable state. It's a much better reason for him to hate Yugi than in the show where Kaiba just walks away and sulks in his mansion. Actually, why did Gallop think that was a good idea? Kaiba just abandons Mokuba and the company for Pegasus and the Big Five to take. Like, yeah, your brother was kidnapped, but that was thanks to you, Kaiba. He left him defenseless all by himself because Kaiba needed to learn the heart of the cards away from his business. Couldn't he have just learned the heart of the cards and run the company at the same time? This is supposed to be Kaiba after Yugi destroys the evil within his heart. Why? Anyway, unlike the manga, Mokuba just shows up and watches the duel in episode 1, and because Def T got cut from this version of the story, he has nothing to do until a few episodes later on. I think that statement can apply for most characters at some point in the show, honestly. The point I've wanted to make in this video is these 6 characters start at differing points where a majority of their development either got cut in half, or changed in a weird way to suit the show. If something like introductory assassination existed, this is the textbook example because this clearly isn't character assassination. I mean, some of it is character assassination, but you know what I'm trying to say. Made up terms aside, I hope I've made my points clear on why Yu-Gi-Oh! Doesn't work without Def T / the early chapters of the manga. If not, then that's fine too. I'm not really here to convince anyone that the show is bad, this is just my shitty opinion that I thought was worth sharing in video form. To those who stuck around for the whole video, thank you for watching. It's been a while since I last uploaded, and I'm grateful that my Conan video has got so much attention. I hope you all stick around for more Conan related videos on top of all the other things I like to cover on this channel. There were a few characters that I wasn't able to include for a few reasons, even though they probably would have made my argument a bit more stable. Ryo Bakura is another character that was handled much more awkwardly than in the manga, but rather than talk about it now, I'll dedicate a whole video about Ryo and Dark Bakura sometime in the future, which should indicate how badly they were handled in the show. I was gonna cover Anzu Mizaki originally, but I decided to save her for a later video when I'm at a point where I have a much more solid opinion on her character, cause I do think that Anzu will become a much more understandable character to explain once I've read through all of Yu-Gi-Oh! Again. I also wanted to talk more about Shadi, but I decided he needed a video too, since he is one of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s biggest mysteries that went unsolved for years until The Dark Side of Dimensions came out. Until then, I hope you enjoyed listening to me talk about one of my favorite stories that just happens to come from one of my favorite artists of all time. Like, comment, and subscribe to win your next game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Somehow. Anyway. Bye.